Okay, so this is the Zeekr 9X, another 3-row 6-seat SUV, and honestly 2025 has been absolutely flooded with them here in China. Just within the Geely group alone, you've got the Lynk & Co 900, the Galaxy M9, and now this, the Zeekr 9X. And even though we're already in September, this isn't even the last full-size SUV launch of the year. There are still more coming, like the Denza N8L and Leapmotor D16. At this point, the number of full-size SUVs released in China this year might actually outnumber the total launched in the entire history of the industry, which is absolutely crazy. Everybody knows Zeekr sits right at the top of the Geely Group lineup, and the 9X is no exception. You know, this is their most luxurious full-size SUV. It also happens to be the biggest SUV they've ever built. For the numbers, it's 5,239 millimeters long, 2,029 millimeters wide, and 1,819 millimeters tall. Now, the length is actually fairly restrained, but the width and height are a bit bigger than most other full-size EVs. And remember the Zeekr 009 MPV? That thing already feels massive on the road. But park it next to this 9X in the showroom, and suddenly the 009 looks like the little brother. Right up front, the 9X has this massive grille sitting dead center. It almost looks like a scaled-up Rolls-Royce Parthenon grille, and unlike a lot of range-extended EVs that just block everything off for aero, this one's actually functional. It's a real open grille. The finish is neat too. It mixes matte and glossy surfaces, and in person it looks really premium, way nicer than I expected. The headlights follow that same squared-off design language. To push the luxury vibe, Zeekr gave the daytime running lights this crystal-like effect, almost like you're looking at chandelier glass. And around the low beams, you've got a ring of little LEDs mimicking a starry night sky. It's a small touch, but it really sells the upscale feel. But to keep the front-end design clean, Zeekr tucked the 360 camera way down at the bottom of the bumper. And yeah, that's just asking to get dirty. From what I can see, there's no washer system either. That's a bit of a miss because the car's automated parking relies on that 360 camera view. And if the lens is smudged, the whole system won't even engage. For something positioned as Zeekr's top-tier luxury SUV, you'd really expect them to add a self-cleaning feature here. It just feels like the kind of detail that doesn't match the otherwise premium ambition of this car. On wheels, this display car is rocking these massive turbine-style rims wrapped in Pirelli P0 Elect tires, 285/45R22, same spec front and rear. They look cool, but you can already tell efficiency wasn't really the priority here. And that's kind of the theme of this whole design. The car is big, it's boxy, it's square in just about every angle. Even the door handles are traditional pull types instead of flush ones. So aerodynamics, pretty much out the window. Now Zeekr does give you two battery options, a 55 kilowatt hour pack or a bigger 70 kilowatt hour pack. But here's the catch. Even with the larger one, the official CLTC range is only 355 kilometers. Do the math, and you're looking at energy consumption of about 25 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. That's huge, and honestly not very confidence-inspiring for a modern EV. On the driver assist hardware side, this particular car looks like a mid-spec trim. You've got a dual camera setup up front and a forward-facing 192-line LiDAR. Not bad. But if you step up to the top trim, things get a lot more serious. That one comes with a triple camera setup and 5 LiDAR units in total, with the main forward LiDAR running at a crazy 512 lines of resolution. And all of that is backed by not one but 2 of NVIDIA's Thor-U chips. So yeah, the full package is basically armed to the teeth with hardware. Alright, let's take a look at the chassis and see if it really lives up to the luxury positioning. Up front, you've got a double wishbone setup, and in the rear, it's a multi-link independent suspension. The car is running dual-chamber air springs and dual-valve CDC dampers, so on paper, this is proper high-end stuff. Peeking through the front wheel well, the upper control arm looks like aluminum. And you know me, after seeing Tesla's Model Y with that cast iron arm dressed up to look like aluminum, I had to bring in the magnet test. Sure enough, this one checks out. It's the real deal, aluminum confirmed. Now here's where it gets a little disappointing. That upper control arm uses a single ball joint design. If they had gone with a dual ball joint setup, you'd get a wider range of tuning and sharper handling. Same story when you look underneath. Everything in the front suspension is aluminum, which is great, but again, the lower control arm sticks to a single ball joint layout. So yeah, the materials are top notch, but structurally it falls just a little short of what I'd expect at this level. Now moving to the rear suspension, the same story here. The beefy H-shaped lower control arm is aluminum, and there's another aluminum link right next to it. I also looked up some teardown videos online, and it turns out the upper control arm is aluminum too. So yeah, just like up front, no cost cutting here. Materials wise, this thing is solid. What's interesting is that Zeekr went with a spring and damper separation layout in the rear. That's a smart move for a 3-row SUV because you need the suspension to be soft enough for comfort, but also strong enough to keep the third row from bouncing around like crazy. This setup gives them more room to fine-tune. One thing you won't find here is rear wheel steering, but honestly, leaving it out frees up plenty of space for this layout makes sense. What did surprise me though is that the rear underbody doesn't have the same protective shielding as the front. You can clearly see the high voltage cables exposed underneath. Not sure if this is just a pre-production oversight, but hopefully the final production cars will cover that up. Alright, let's take a look at the body panels. Starting with the tailgate, everything here is aluminum except for that thin strip right at the top, which is steel. Moving around to the rear fender, it's steel as well. But all 4 doors, aluminum. Front fenders, back to steel. And the hood, aluminum again. So basically, aside from the front and rear quarter panels, it's aluminum doors and aluminum hood. What we call the 4 doors, 2 lids approach, that's pretty much the same formula we've seen from Nio. So in terms of aluminum content, Zeekr is right in line with them. The charging ports on the left side of the car and the cover slides out sideways. Now that sliding hinge mechanism actually eats up a lot of space, which is why both ports are kind of crammed right next to each other. But here's something I really like. You get this long indicator light plus a small built-in illumination lamp. That's a thoughtful touch. I can't tell you how many times I've had to fumble around at a dark charging station with my phone flashlight just to line things up. If my car had this little lamp, it would have saved me a lot of hassle. Moving around to the rear, the overall design really ties in with the front. You've got these full-width taillights that have a crystal-like effect, and on either side there are these little starry sky-style accent lights along with blue indicators for the driver assist system. Nice touch, feels upscale without being over the top. The tailgate is a split design, same as the Lynk & Co 900. License plate sits on the lower half, and up top you've got a hidden rear wiper tucked neatly away. The release button is right by the plate bracket, easy reach, perfect height. Now once you open it up, well, this is where things get a little disappointing. The trunk space is fine, but nothing impressive for a full-size SUV. Pop up the floor panel and you'll see there's no additional underfloor storage. Pretty much the same story as a lot of other range-extended SUVs in this class. Our cargo space is really limited. If you're traveling fully loaded with 6 passengers, you're either packing super light or you're strapping a cargo box to the roof. Now let's talk functionality, because the Zeekr 9X is honestly one of the most feature-packed SUVs I've ever poked around in. Along the lower edge of the tailgate, you get 2 hidden hooks, and up on the top half there are another 2. Super practical for shopping bags or cargo nets. And check this out, the inner trim panel has a pair of little ambient lights built right in. These can't cost Zeekr more than a couple bucks, but they make a big difference, and you just don't see them on a lot of SUVs in that 200 to 300,000 RMB range. For example, the Zeekr 7X doesn't even get them. And because this is a split tailgate, the lower half actually serves 2 purposes. When it's closed, it stops stuff from rolling out. When it's open, it's like a little bench for sitting and enjoying the view. Zeekr even carved out these square cup holder spots on either side of the lower gate, which is a fun little detail. Inside the cargo area, you've got lights on both sides, a hook on the right, and then on the left, this is where the magic happens, 2 rows of buttons. These let you adjust suspension height, fold down the 3rd row seats, and even slide the 3rd row forward. And just next to that control panel, a full 220-volt household outlet. Perfect for running a cooler, coffee machine, or even a laptop if you're working out of the back. When you fold the 3rd row seatbacks flat, you get this really nice, completely level load floor. Super handy for hauling big items. Think bikes, boxes, or even a small fridge. Combine that with the split tailgate, and suddenly this turns into a pretty versatile space. You could literally stretch out back here for a nap. Well, assuming you don't mind a few mosquitoes keeping you company. And honestly, if Zeekr offered a little custom tailgate tent, this thing would make a pretty solid camping setup. All right, let's hop inside. But before we do, I've got to talk about these doors. This thing has powered doors, and honestly, they're the best execution I've ever seen. Normally with powered doors, you always get that weird draggy feeling when you push or pull them, like the motor's fighting you a little. Not here. If nobody told you these were powered, you'd swear they were just normal doors. Smooth, natural, no resistance. But if you do know they're powered, you can just hit the little button to open or close them. And when it comes time to shut the door, you don't have to awkwardly press a tiny handle switch. You just give it a gentle push and the motor finishes the job nice and quiet. And here's the best part. Even if someone goes full caveman and slams the door with all their strength, the system just absorbs it and still closes softly with that perfect power-assisted pull. No more obnoxious bang-bang noises. Honestly, this feels like the first time power doors have been done right. I'd call them invisible power doors. The electric and manual operation blend together so seamlessly you forget it's even there. Hopefully more cars start adopting this approach. Now stepping inside, let's start with the door panel. I'm not going to get into whether the design is pretty or not, that's way too subjective, but from a materials and functionality standpoint, this thing is dialed in. First off, everything you touch is leather, top to bottom, all wrapped. Even the door pocket down at the bottom of the door, they lined it with Alcantara. Totally unnecessary, but it feels super premium. Then the functionality, you've got 3 speakers just in the door. The seat adjustment controls are right up here on the panel, very Mercedes style. And besides the usual door pocket, there's also a hidden storage compartment. Pop it open and it's surprisingly big, which is great. And for the finishing touches, you've got wood trim, gloss black, little crystal accents, plus 3 strips of ambient lighting layered through the panel. It really cranks up the luxury vibe in here. And of course, all 4 doors are fitted with laminated double pane acoustic glass. The good stuff that keeps the outside world nice and quiet. Now, the audio system in here is from Naim, straight out of the UK. Yeah, the same brand Bentley uses. That's a serious name drop when it comes to in-car hi-fi. Unfortunately, the showroom was pretty packed today, so I couldn't really give it a proper listen. Moving up to the dashboard, the design here is way more minimal. You've got 2 massive 3.5K OLED screens joined together, and that's basically it. No extra trim pieces, no fancy accents, just a leather wrap across the dash. Compared to the door panels we just looked at, it honestly feels a little half-baked. The seats though, those are where Zeekr didn't cut corners. You've got built-in headrest speakers, the usual heating, cooling and massage features, plus extendable thigh supports for both the driver and passenger. That's a nice touch, makes long drives a lot easier on your legs. Swinging over to the driver's side, I've got to say, finally, Zeekr ditched that awkward steering wheel design they've used on other models. This one's two-tone, feels good in the hand, and the size is just right. Best part, it doesn't block the infotainment screen anymore. Thank you, Zeekr. Even though the 9X comes with a head-up display, Zeekr still decided to keep a traditional driver display as well. And honestly, I think that's the right move. Different people have different preferences. I'm personally a big fan of head-up displays. I love having all my info right there on the windshield, but I know plenty of folks who just don't like it or they find it distracting. So keeping both options here, no problem at all. It makes the car work for everyone. One thing that actually caught me off guard is that the 9X comes with manual air vents. Now, personally, I don't really care if they're manual or electric, but here's the thing. I've met people who really dislike electric vents. Like, for them, it's a total deal breaker. On the flip side, I've never met anyone who said they hated manual vents. So honestly, sticking with the good old manual setup here feels like the safer choice. Another thing that really surprised me is the storage under the center console. Instead of going with the open style layout that's super common on Chinese EVs, Zeekr actually went with the same kind of setup you get in a Model Y. So you reach in from this little opening up top to grab whatever's inside. Now, the upside is it gives you way better privacy. People can't just look in and see your stuff. But honestly, day to day, it's not all that convenient to use. Personally, I still prefer the open style layout where you can just toss a bag in and grab it out quickly. So yeah, I know there's a fridge tucked under the center console, but the actual armrest storage here is just way too small. Inside, you do get 2 USB-C ports, which is nice, but I couldn't find any pass-through opening for the cables. That means if you're someone who doesn't like relying on wireless charging, maybe you think it's too slow, and you want to plug in with a wired connection, it's a little awkward. Not a deal breaker, but definitely less convenient than it should be. Right below the central screen, you've got 2 air vents. Finally, Zeekr didn't stick them up on top of the dash like they did in some of their other models. Thank goodness. Then you've got this familiar row of physical buttons. Only the one on the far right is customizable, and here it's set up to pop open the glove box. Honestly, I think that's what most people would choose anyway. And speaking of the glove box, it's just a normal one this time, not that weird flip-up lid like we saw on the 7X, so you don't have to worry about all your stuff spilling out. Next to the wireless charging pad, you've got 2 rows of physical buttons and a crystal-finished rotary knob. The buttons mainly handle chassis functions, things like adjusting suspension height or activating hill descent control. And that crystal knob, that's your media controller for volume and playback, which feels really premium to the touch. Now let's talk about the seats. The 9X is wrapped in Nappa leather, but this isn't the kind of leather you're probably used to. First off, the touch is really dry, not that slightly oily or glossy finish you sometimes get. And second, it's got this pronounced grain to it, not the fine, smooth texture we see so often. I don't know if the camera really captures it, but I'll try to get close so you can see what I mean. Personally, I love this choice. The grainy texture means more friction, so you don't slide around as much when the car's moving. Both the first and second row get massage seats, and not just the back. They've added hip massage too, which is awesome for relieving pressure during long trips. That's the kind of thoughtful detail you really start to appreciate after a few hours on the road. Now let's hop into the rear. On the B-pillar, you've got an electronic door switch, so you don't have to lean out awkwardly to close the door. Along with the overhead vents, there's another set of air vents right here on the pillar. Really nice to see. The second row windows even get powered sunshades, which is something you don't often see in Chinese EVs. Even Nio only gives you manual shades. But the real party trick back here isn't the oversized fridge or the rotating zero-gravity seats. It's this overhead entertainment screen. At first glance, it looks pretty ordinary, and honestly, it's smaller than what you get in most rivals. But here's the twist. It slides forward and backward. I have no idea which engineer thought this was a good idea, because from my perspective, all it really does is add cost while forcing them to use a smaller screen in the first place. Functionally, it doesn't add much. That said, when you slide it back, it does open up the view above the second row, so I guess that's one small upside. And here's the bigger issue with this sliding screen. Because it has to move along the roof, they couldn't put a crossbeam at the B pillar. That definitely compromises the overall rigidity of the body. To make up for the loss in torsional stiffness, Zeekr had to beef up the crossbeam above the A pillar and the roof's longitudinal rails with higher strength steel. That keeps the structure safe, sure, but it also adds weight and cost. So really, this screen isn't just a gimmick, it's a gimmick that makes the car more expensive. Drop your eyes down and you'll spot the rear control screen on the back of the center armrest. And right underneath it, yep, a fridge. Not just any fridge either. This thing is massive. It can even chill down to -6 degrees Celsius, which means in the middle of summer, you could actually stash ice cream in here. That's pretty awesome. The only downside, because it's so big, Zeekr couldn't package an electric open and close. So yeah, you'll have to pull it out and push it back in the old school way by hand. The rear control screen works just like what we've seen in the Xiaomi U7. You can actually pop it out and use it as a handheld, but honestly, it feels more like you're holding a smartphone than a proper tablet. It's definitely on the smaller side. Now, the rear cup holder is tucked into the side of the second row right seat. It's one of those fold-out designs, and Zeekr even added a little storage tray that can support up to 5 kilograms. Pretty neat touch. But here's the catch. Folding it back in is kind of a little tricky. I fumbled around for a while before finally finding the release button hidden underneath. Not exactly intuitive. Now, both of the second row seats technically support a zero-gravity mode, but honestly, the execution here isn't that convincing. The seat back angle doesn't recline far enough, the base doesn't tilt up nearly as much as you'd want, and the leg rest is just too short. So yeah, I wouldn't really call this a true zero-gravity seat. For me, the benchmark is still Li Auto's Mega. Those captain's chairs in the second row are on another level of comfort. Just like the Link and Co 900, the second row seats here can rotate, but only about 90 degrees in normal use. That's mostly just to make getting in and out easier, or you could call it a little scenic mode for sitting sideways. But oh man, the button to control this is in the weirdest place. Instead of putting it right on the armrest where it makes sense, Zeekr decided to tuck it away on the door side. Honestly, I had to fumble around to even find it. This has to be one of the worst switch placements I've ever seen. Since that big fixed armrest in the middle eats up so much space, Zeekr added these two buttons on the C-pillar, hit one and the second row seat automatically slides forward, opening up access to the third row. Way more convenient than trying to squeeze through that narrow aisle. Alright, that's it for the second row. Before we hop into the third row, let's measure the longitudinal space. I've set the driver's seat to my usual driving position, and the second row is adjusted to leave about 1 fist of legroom. Now, sliding into the third row, for reference, I'm 1 m or about 5'7". Back here, I still have roughly 20 centimeters of legroom, which is pretty much on par with what you'll find in most other 3-row 6-seat SUVs. As for headroom, with the seat back in its most upright position, I've got about 10 centimeters left. If I recline it all the way back, that opens up to more than 10 centimeters, so plenty of clearance either way. Now let's talk about the third row, and honestly this one's loaded with features. You can slide the seats forward and back, recline the backrest, and there's even an intercom button so you can chat with the folks up front without yelling. Up top, you've got your own sunroof with a shade, plus the side windows come with manual sunshades too. Over on the armrest, you'll find cup holders, and right below that is a surprisingly large storage bin. I'd say this is hands down the most feature-packed third row we've reviewed on the channel so far. I also noticed there's a hidden storage pocket on the side of the second row seat, and inside it I even found the remote for the rear entertainment screen. Pretty neat. Honestly, with all these little cubbies and compartments, this might just be the SUV with the most storage options in its cabin that I've reviewed so far. On the back of the second row seats, you'll also find a pair of buttons. They do the same thing as the ones on the C-pillar, just a single press and the seat slides forward, opening up space so you can get into the third row from the side. Super handy. I tried it out myself. Once the seat slides forward, I can easily reach the switch on the door panel. Open the door and the opening is huge. With the powered step folding out, getting out of the car feels super easy and even kind of elegant. No awkward climbing or stumbling at all. The only thing I'm not too happy about is the space under the second row seats. There's just not enough room to stretch your feet all the way through, and that does take away a bit from long distance comfort. Alright, let's wrap things up with trims and pricing. The Zeekr 9X comes in 3 trims: Max, Ultra and Hyper. Both the Max and Ultra share the same setup: a 55 kWh 6C NCM battery, dual motor, all-wheel drive, and a total of 898 horsepower, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3.9 seconds. Pretty insane already for a big SUV. Now here's the weird part. The Ultra trim actually has 12 kilometers less rated range than the Max. Why? No one really knows yet. Maybe it's some hidden equipment difference, but Zeekr hasn't explained. And then we get to the Hyper. This one cranks it up to a 70 kWh 6C battery, 3 motors, yes, dual motors on the rear axle, for a total output of 1,401 horsepower. That is completely ridiculous for a 3-row SUV. 0 to 100 in 3.1 seconds. Honestly, the only thing holding it back is the tires. With only 2 85s on the rear, traction just can't keep up with that much power. Throw some wider rubber back there and you might even dip under 3 seconds. Pricing: the Max is listed at 480,000 RMB, around 67 grand. The Ultra is 500,000 RMB, about 70,000 USD. And the big Hyper trim is 570,000 RMB, roughly 80,000 USD. Now here's my take. If we're only talking chassis and cabin, there is no way this car justifies that kind of price. Last year, people might have called this pricing fair, maybe even exciting, but this year, things are different. The new Nio ES8 already pushed the price benchmark for 3-row luxury SUVs down to about 400,000 RMB. So unless you really want that over-the-top horsepower number, I don't see many buyers shelling out the extra cash. Anyway, that's the Zeekr 9X. What do you guys think? Overpriced or worth it for the insane power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this review was helpful. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.